to 1789. For centuries, the peoples of the various empires and numerous principalities of Europe have been governed, more or less, under the system of hereditary monarchy. Under this structure, the crown is passed down from one member of the royal house to another, usually a father to a son. Supporting the monarchy is a structure of aristocrats and clergymen. To form alliances or to keep the peace, the royals of one country often marry the royals of another. Such a social arrangement carries with it benefits as well as flaws. Advantages: a united people held together by strong ties of kin and culture, a highly stable and traditional order of things, an aristocratic class that feels itself morally obligated to protect and serve their subjects, benefits of high civilization introduced to colonial territories and primitive peoples. Disadvantages: possibility of incompetent or unenlightened monarchs coming to power, tendency towards out-of-touch elitism among some of the aristocratic class, difficulty faced by common men wishing to rise above their station in life. In 1743, a goldsmith named Amschel Moses Bauer opens a coin shop in Frankfurt, Germany. Above his door he hangs a sign depicting a Roman eagle on a red shield. The shop became known as the Red Shield, German, Rothschild. Amschel Bauer has a very intelligent son named Meyer Amschel Bauer. The father spends much of his time teaching the son everything he can about the money-lending business and the dynamics of finance. After the father's death in 1755, Meyer went to work at a bank in Hanover, owned by the Oppenheimer family. Meyer's immense ability was quickly recognized, and he quickly advanced within the firm. He was awarded a junior partnership. His success allowed him to return to Frankfurt and purchase the business his father had established in 1743. The red shield was still displayed over the door. Recognizing the significance of the red shield, his father had adopted it as his emblem from the red flag, which was the emblem of the revolutionary-minded Jews in Eastern Europe. Meyer Amschel Bauer changed the family name to Rothschild. It was at this point that the House of Rothschild came into being. Through his experience with the Oppenheimers, Rothschild learns that loaning money to governments is much more profitable than loaning to individuals. The loans are not only much bigger, but they are secured by the nation's taxes. The Rothschild banking dynasty becomes the richest family business in world history. Forbes magazine refers to Meyer Amschel Rothschild as a founding father of international finance. Rothschild's 5 sons will later branch out to head banking dynasties in Austria, Italy, France, and England, becoming lenders to the kings of Europe, often financing both sides of the European wars that will so enrich them. To this very day, the House of Rothschild and its allies remain the dominant force behind world finance, globalism, environmentalism, and liberalism. The Jewish Zionist Rothschild family will also play a major role in establishing Israel in the 1900s. There can be no doubt Meyer Amschel Rothschild was the original godfather of the New World Order. August 15, 1769. Napoleon Bonaparte is born to an aristocratic family from the Italian island of Corsica, French jurisdiction. His father, Carlo, was originally a follower of the Corsican patriot leader, Pasquale Paoli, but later became a supporter of French rule. Napoleon is raised Catholic, but will become a deist in his adult life, belief in an intelligent creative force, the Creator. At the age of 10, he is enrolled in a religious school in France, where he adopts a French version of his Italian name. Henceforward, he will be known as Napoleon Bonaparte. After distinguishing himself in mathematics, Napoleon is later admitted to an elite military academy in Paris, where he trains to become an artillery officer. Napoleon graduates at the age of 16 in 1785. Contrary to popular belief, initiated by the British press and later exploited by Jewish psychologist Alfred Adler in 1908, Napoleon does not have short man's inferiority complex. His adult height of 5 foot 7 inches is actually an average height for the early 1800s. He will select tall men as his bodyguards, which perhaps gives some the false impression that Napoleon is short in stature. May 1st, 1776. Jewish professor Adam Weishaupt forms the secret order of the Illuminati in Bavaria, Germany. He is most likely a paid agent of Rothschild, also based in Germany. Weishaupt, codename Spartacus, recruits wealthy elites to his society. The Illuminati, or Enlightened Ones, infiltrate Masonic lodges which serve as cover for their activities. They plot the overthrow of governments, the destruction of Christianity, and the future arrival of a world communal state, New World Order. Bavarian authorities disband the Illuminati in 1784, but the tactics and goals of the order are clearly evident in the French Revolution of 1789 and future communist plots. To this day, May 1st, May Day, remains a sort of holy day to communists, anarchists, and progressives. 1789. The French Revolution is a period of radical upheaval in France. Unlike the American Revolution, whose deist and Christian leaders placed limits on government power, the atheistic radicals of the spontaneous French Revolution, financed and organized by agents of the International New World Order secret societies, seek total power. Their rallying cries of liberty, fraternity, equality are empty words that attract gullible mobs. The revolution leads to the rise of the mad killer Robespierre and the Jacobins, the most prominent political club of the French Revolution. By 1791, there are 900 Jacobin clubs in France associated with the main club in Paris. Contrary to the image of the French Revolution being a ground-up uprising of the downtrodden, Jacobins are usually the elite of their local societies and also included artisans and tradesmen. Jacobin clubs serve as debating societies where Frenchmen air their views and discuss current political issues. Many Jacobins use the meetings to organize forces and plan tactics. The most notorious deputy connected with the Jacobin club is Robespierre. From 1793 to 1794, the Committee of Public Safety operates as the dictatorship of France. A Jacobin reign of terror is unleashed. The Bourbon King Louis XVI, Queen Marie Antoinette, and 40,000 others are executed, mostly by public guillotine. The Jacobin mobs single out priests, nuns, and the wealthy for special brutality. The Jacobins, forerunners of the Communists, are eventually displaced by more sensible elements of the revolution. Robespierre himself is executed. The Directory will control France from 1795 to 1799 as the monarchies of Europe wage a war against Republican France. Though historians portray the revolution as a spontaneous uprising of the oppressed, the funding of the movement and the disciplined organization of the Jacobin radicals suggest otherwise. Was Rothschild money behind the revolt? Could this be the meaning of the French Revolution's theme color, red? Rothschild is German for Red Shield. Many more spontaneous red revolts will follow over the centuries to come. 1792 to 1815. The royal houses of monarchist Europe will wage a series of on and off coalition wars, 7 wars in all, upon post-revolutionary France, at varying times Great Britain, the chief instigator, and varying combinations which include the Netherlands, Russia, Austria, Prussia, Spain, Hungary, Sweden, and numerous other minor kingdoms unite in opposition to Republican France. The ensuing wars that follow will also become known, unfairly, as the Napoleonic Wars. We say unfairly because Napoleon did not start this never-ending European war on France. He inherited it. The first coalition of 1793 to 1797 was established in an attempt to overthrow the French Revolution of 1789. It comprised Spain, Holland, Austria, Prussia, Britain, and Sardinia. 1793 to 1794. As European monarchies, led by Britain, wage war against Jacobin Republican France, Napoleon, a French Republican, is appointed artillery commander of the Republican forces at the siege of Toulon, a French city that has risen against the revolution and is now occupied by British troops. Napoleon adopts a plan to capture a hill where Republican guns can dominate the city's harbor and force the British to evacuate. The assault on the position, during which Bonaparte is wounded in the thigh, leads to the capture of the city. Napoleon is promoted to brigadier general at the age of 24. Gaining the attention of the Committee of Public Safety, he is put in charge of the artillery of France's Army of Italy. Young Napoleon then devises a plan for attacking the Kingdom of Sardinia as part of France's campaign against the Allies. Carrying out Bonaparte's plan in April 1794, the French army stages a series of stunning advances. 1795. The Jacobins, forerunners of the Communists, are eventually displaced by more moderate elements of the Republican Revolution. Robespierre himself is then executed. The Directory will govern France from 1795 to 1799, as both the worried monarchies of Europe, led by Great Britain, and the displaced Jacobin Reds of the New World Order continue to wage war against a French nation that is divided in its own loyalties among supporters of Jacobins, Republicans, and Bourbon monarchists. March 1796. Napoleon marries Josephine de Beauharnais in 1796. He was 26, and she was a 32-year-old widow whose first husband had been executed during the Revolution. Josephine herself had been imprisoned by Robespierre and the Jacobins. Though he will remarry to Austrian royalty in later years, for political reasons, Josephine will always remain the true love of Napoleon's life. He often sends her love letters while on his military campaigns. 1797. 2 days after the marriage, Bonaparte leaves Paris to take command of the neglected French army in Italy. During this campaign, Bonaparte also becomes increasingly influential in French politics by founding 2 newspapers, one for the troops in his army and another for circulation in France. Napoleon completes his successful Italian campaign, defeating Austrian, Sardinian, and Neapolitan forces before capturing Rome. Italy did not exist as a unified state at this time. His stunning victories finally bring to an end what is now known as the First Coalition War against France, and leads to the Treaty of Campo Formio, negotiated by Napoleon himself between France and Austria. The French general's stature as a military genius and leader is now such that he can openly defy the atheistic Directory's orders to dethrone the Pope and get away with it. Napoleon is by now a legend in the making, soon to be a political force in his own right, a force beyond Illuminati, Rothschild, New World Order control. July 1798. Fearing his growing popularity, in 1798 the Directory sends Napoleon off on the Egyptian campaign. The high point of this campaign is the Battle of the Pyramids, also known as the Battle of Mbabe, was a major engagement fought on July 21, 1798, during the French invasion of Egypt. The French army under Napoleon Bonaparte scores a decisive victory against the forces of the Ottoman Turks and local Mamluk rulers. Napoleon names the battle after the Egyptian pyramids because they were faintly visible on the horizon when the battle took place. It was the battle where Napoleon employed one of his significant contributions to military tactics, the divisional square. Actually a rectangle, the deployment of the French brigades into these massive formations repeatedly threw back multiple cavalry charges by the Mamluks. The victory effectively seals the French conquest of Egypt. Napoleon enters Cairo after the battle and creates a local administration under his supervision. He approaches the Egyptians not as a conqueror, but as a liberator who greatly respects their religion and culture. This position earns him solid support in Egypt and the admiration of Muhammad Ali, who later succeeds in declaring Egypt's independence from the Ottoman Turks. 1798 to 1801. The French campaign in Egypt and Syria is Napoleon Bonaparte's campaign to protect French trade, undermine Britain's access to India, and promote scientific enterprise in the region. An unusual aspect of the Egyptian military expedition is the inclusion of a large group of scientists and scholars. This deployment of intellectual resources is an indication of Napoleon's devotion to higher learning. Much of what we know today about ancient Egypt is the result of this mission. The discoveries include the deciphering of ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics by way of the Rosetta Stone. 1798. John Robison was a prominent physicist and professor of philosophy at Scotland's Edinburgh University. He worked with James Watt on the early steam car, and he later invented the siren. The Illuminati had attempted to recruit him, but he declined. In 1798, he writes Proofs of a Conspiracy Against the Religions and Governments of Europe, in which he exposes the secret societies behind the terrorist French Revolution. His warning to Europe is stark. Quote, An association has been formed for the express purposes of rooting out all the religious establishments and overturning all existing governments. The leaders would rule the world with uncontrollable power, while all the rest would be employed as tools of their unknown superiors." End quote. French priest Abbé Barriel independently developed similar views that the Illuminati had infiltrated Freemasonry, leading to the excesses of the French Revolution. In 1798, the Reverend G.W. Snyder sent Robeson's book to George Washington for his thoughts on the subject. Washington replied, quote, "It was not my intention to doubt that the doctrines of the Illuminati and principles of Jacobinism had not spread in the United States. On the contrary, no one is more truly satisfied of this fact than I am. The idea that I meant to convey was, that I did not believe that the lodges of Freemasons in this country had, as societies, endeavored to propagate the diabolical tenets of the first, or pernicious principles of the latter, if they are susceptible of separation. That individual of them may have done it, or that the founder or instrument employed to found the democratic societies in the United States may have had these objects, and actually had a separation of the people from their government in view, is too evident to be questioned." End quote. (1799 to 1815). After amassing an enormous fortune from his base in the Hessian city of Frankfurt, Germany, Meyer Amschel Rothschild sends his 5 sons abroad to expand the Rothschild family empire throughout Europe. Each of the brothers will emerge as dominant financial players and behind-the-scenes political players in their respective new countries. The 5 sons and the 5 sub-dynasties they will operate are as follows. Anselm stays in Frankfurt to run the German operation, Solomon, Vienna, Austria, Nathan, Manchester and then London, England, Karl, Naples, Italy, Jacob, Paris, France. Of the 5, Nathan in London, the city of London, will become the wealthiest and most powerful of the brothers. His power surpasses even that of the other existing Jewish family dynasties that own the Bank of England, the Montefiores, Goldsmiths, Mocadas. The London Rothschilds are the beating heart of the centuries-old movement to tear down European civilization and erect the New World Order in its place. Unhappy with the expansion of the French Empire won by France after the previous war imposed upon it, Britain, Austria, and Russia initiate the next round of war. Napoleon is away in Egypt at this time. The Allies are very successful and poised to not only control Italy, but also to thrust into southern France itself. November 1799. Napoleon and his allies in Paris are convinced that a change of regime, strengthening the executive power, is necessary. Napoleon, who feels he is fighting a series of fruitless wars in Egypt, is persuaded that only he could save France. The war hero of Toulon, Italy, and Egypt returns to a deeply divided and chaotic Paris as the country itself faces Allied invasion. With the help of key French senators, Napoleon stages a bloodless coup and is named First Consul. A plebiscite, popular vote, is held soon afterwards, and Napoleon's ascension to First Consul is overwhelmingly approved by the French public. The New World Order gang incited the French Revolution in order to overthrow the monarchy. Now, with the rapid rise of Napoleon Bonaparte, the New World Order has lost control of France. Immediately after seizing power in France, Napoleon offers to make peace with the coalition arrayed against him. Britain and Austria reject his offer. So, in 1800, Napoleon does the unexpected. He restages Hannibal's crossing of the Alps and then marches his army through the snowy Great St. Bernard Pass to attack Austrian forces based in Italy. Napoleon defeats the surprised Austrians at the Battle of Marengo on June 14, 1800. Following Marengo, the massive Battle of Hohenlinden forces the Austrians to the negotiating table. As a result, Austrian Emperor Francis II signs the Treaty of Luneville in February 1801. France will retain all of its previous gains and obtain new lands in Tuscany, Italy, while Austria is granted Venetia and the Dalmatian coast. And so, in just a matter of months, under the decisive political and military leadership of Napoleon Bonaparte, a French disaster became a French triumph. Britain remains at war with France. October 1800. The communistic Jacobins, working for their secret New World Order Rothschild bosses in London, want their bloody dictatorship back. They openly call for the death of Napoleon. One leftist agitator named Metke publishes a pamphlet comparing Napoleon to Roman ruler Julius Caesar, who was killed by daggers wielded by Brutus and others. Metke openly calls for the birth of thousands of Bruti to stab the tyrant Bonaparte. Indeed, one of the Jacobin plots which is foiled is the conspiracy of the daggers in October 1800s. The Jacobins plan to stab Napoleon, as Julius Caesar had been, as he arrives at the Paris Opera House. Informants are able to foil the assassination plot, but the Jacobins will again try to kill Napoleon. December 1800. 2 months after the dagger plot is foiled, the Jacobins nearly succeed in blowing up Napoleon's carriage with a bomb. Napoleon and Josephine, who faints, both survive the massive blast, but 10 to 12 innocent bystanders are killed, with dozens more injured or maimed. Modern-day liberal historians, apologists for the Jacobins, claim that Bourbon royalists were behind the plot, but Napoleon is convinced that his Jacobin enemies carried out the attack. He uses public outrage over the bombing to annihilate the remnants of the violent and conspiratorial Red Jacobins. Napoleon declared, "For such an atrocious crime we must have vengeance like a thunderbolt. Blood must flow. We must shoot as many guilty men as there have been victims." 1801. After years of persecution at the hands of atheistic Jacobin radicals and also the Directory, Napoleon moves to protect and preserve the Roman Catholic Church that he had spared from extinction during his Italian campaign. Raised Catholic, Napoleon is himself a deist, belief in an intelligent creative force, who retains a special fondness for the moral principles and ceremonies of the Church. Napoleon is also impressed by Islam and believes that people of all faiths should have freedom of conscience. The Concordat of 1801 between Napoleon Bonaparte and Pope Pius VII reaffirms the Roman Catholic Church as the majority church of France and restores its civil status. While the Concordat restores ties to the papacy, the balance of church-state relations tilts in Napoleon's favor. Education is very high on Napoleon's list of priorities, especially that of the middle class. He believes in a system of merit, and for such a system to be effective there must be widespread education at the secondary level. To that end, Napoleon establishes the system of lycée. Lycée is an upper-level secondary school preparing students for the baccalaureate, which is the degree required for university admission. Lycées enroll the nation's best students in a course of instruction lasting 6 years. The schools are divided into 3 areas of specialization: classical studies, modern studies, and scientific technological studies. Under the system, elementary schools are to be the responsibility of the local municipalities. Catholic schools take on a significant amount of the load for mass elementary education. Secondary education, however, is the base education for the future leaders of France, as well as members of the bureaucracy and the military. The heart of the new system is the establishment of 30 lycées, which provide educational opportunities beyond the secondary schools. The government provides a fixed salary for teachers, but also pays out bonuses for successful teachers. Top-notch teachers are chosen based upon recommendations provided by inspectors. The inspectors are also given responsibility for inspecting the schools on a regular basis. The education system introduced by Napoleon has 2 purposes. It is intended to provide educated elite that can help run the country and the military, and it is also designed to provide for an increased middle class, one that would be successful and hence non-revolutionary. There is also a great emphasis on patriotism in the schools. Napoleon, quote, "Of all our institutions, public education is the most important. Everything depends on it, the present and the future. It is essential that the morals and political ideas of the generation which is now growing up should no longer be dependent upon the news of the day or the circumstances of the moment. Above all, we must secure unity. We must be able to cast a whole generation in the same mold." End quote. March 1802. The Treaty of Amiens ends hostilities between the French Republic and Great Britain. It is signed in the city of Amiens on March 25, 1802, and celebrated as the definitive treaty of peace between Napoleon and Britain. In retrospect, it appears to have been a British ploy to buy time and assemble yet another coalition. May 1803. The Peace of Amiens lasts only 1 year and is the only period of extended peace during the Great French War between 1793 and 1815. Britain, under the leadership of King George III and Prime Minister William Pitt, does not evacuate Malta as promised. Instead, the British protest against Bonaparte's annexation of Piedmont and his act of mediation, which establishes a new Swiss Confederation, though neither of these territories is covered by the treaty. These phony pretexts for starting a new war against Napoleon culminate in a declaration of war by Britain in 1803, and the reassembly of yet another coalition against France in 1805 of Britain, Russia, Naples, Sicily, and Sweden. Having failed to kill Napoleon from within France itself, the New World Order Mafia and the royal families of Europe will continue to wage these bloody coalition wars on post-revolutionary France. It is important to note that without Rothschild funding, the future coalition wars will not be possible, at least not in the long term. The British-led Old World Order, the unenlightened monarchies, and the New World Order, the Rothschild Illuminati Jacobins, both seek the demise of Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon needs money to finance France's war effort against the European powers, but he is unwilling to borrow from big bankers. Napoleon once wrote, quote, "When a government is dependent upon bankers for money, they and not the leaders of the government control the situation, since the hand that gives is above the hand that takes. Money has no motherland. Financiers are without patriotism and without decency. Their sole object is gain." End quote. Instead of crawling to Rothschild, Napoleon raises money by proposing to sell the massive territory of Louisiana to the United States. President Jefferson jumps at the offer. Napoleon's move also closes a possible front in the Western Hemisphere from which Britain could wage war against French territory. February 1804. The Jacobins are not the only ones who want Napoleon dead or removed from the scene. Royalist Bourbon conspirators, such as the Comte d'Artois, brother of the guillotined King Louis XVI, funded and protected by William Pitt and his gang in Britain, want to take Napoleon out too. The foiled kidnapping plot of 1804 is one of the bolder schemes, and was actually hatched back in 1803 while the Treaty of Amiens was still in effect. As he had done after the failed bomb plot of 1800, Napoleon cracks down hard as his popularity reaches even greater heights. The key plotters are executed. During his later years of exile, Napoleon defended his controversial crackdown on Bourbon family royalists, the Old World Order, and Jacobins, the New World Order. Quote, "Am I a dog to be hounded down and killed in the street, while my murderers are to be regarded as sacrosanct? I caused the Duc d'Enghien to be arrested and judged, because it was necessary for the safety, interest, and the honor of the French people. When the Comte d'Artois, by his own confession, was supporting 60 assassins at Paris. In similar circumstances I would act in the same way again. What I did was to silence the Royalists and the Jacobins once and for all." End quote. March 1804. Napoleon's lasting reforms include higher education, a tax code, road systems, and sewer systems. His set of civil laws, the Code Civil, now known as Napoleonic Code, is prepared by committees of legal experts. Napoleon participates actively in the sessions of the Council of State that revises the drafts. The code forbids privileges based on birth, allows freedom of religion, and specifies that government jobs must go to the most qualified. Other codes are commissioned by Napoleon to codify criminal and commerce law. A code of criminal instruction is also published, which enacts rules of due process. The code will be accepted throughout much of Europe and remain in force even after Napoleon's eventual defeat. It is a revolutionary idea that spurs the development of the middle class by extending to all the right to own property. Napoleon also reorganizes what had been the Holy Roman Empire, made up of more than 1,000 entities, into a streamlined 40-state confederation of the Rhine. This confederation will provide the basis for the German Confederation and the unification of Germany in 1871. Though technically a dictator, Napoleon uses his power to promote meritocracy, equality under the law, and liberty. not only among his French subjects, but also for the peoples living in territories conquered after winning the many coalition wars imposed upon France.